Now the thing is, we can maybe add a few together, right? But when we go into our GeoChild combine, which actually holds the geometry now, we only have one material. First of all, let's go back in our folder here. And I wanted to make a few new test materials. We're going to do the same thing as we did here, just with a new one. So like create a material and we call this test. We're going to open that up. We're going to select it and make it unlit. And we're going to make a new parameter, 3 left click, plug it in. We're going to right click this, convert to parameter, and we call this color. We're going to save and apply this. We're not making it a wireframe, we don't need a wireframe here. And now we can right click, make a material instance, we can open it up, and we can change the color here. Let's make this one, I don't know, just something very clear, right? And if we now put this material on our GeoChild combine, those will all have the same material. But what if I want one to have another material than another one, right? So we need to sort of separate this. So let's go into our GeoChild combine, where we mainly work with that. Well, where do we want to separate this? We want to separate it sort of here, somewhere in the end. Because remember, we are here allocating some new space. We're copying our geometry into a new space and then transform it. And then either we are booleaning it or we are appending it. And if we change the material before we add it to our actual mesh, to our GeoChild combine, it will also transfer it inside here. So if we remap material IDs, as I explained earlier, the IDs are just simply, is it material 0, is it material 1, whatever. If we remap this here, so from here we can then remap it. So we can say that those here, the actual geometry, have a different one. They're not 0, they're 1, or whatever they might be. So we sort of want to control this from here, just as we did with the bool. So we're doing essentially exactly the same as before. Let's go into our geometry here, into the parent, and we're going to add another variable here. And we're calling this material ID. We're going to drag this inside here. And we're going to change this to an integer, so it's just like full numbers, 1, 2, 3, etc. without a comma. And we're going to expose it so we can see it right here, material ID. We go to our combine, and as we did with the bool, we can just grab it from here, material ID, get material ID. And we can plug it in and we can compile it. So another thing is, which I didn't mention yet, when you have your when you allocate something, right? So create a separate storage, you have to always release all compute meshes. And we're doing this after we did the whole loop thing here. So right here, this is just so we can delete those temporary meshes. Now we also want to subtract, right? We also want to like boot something out. So for that, we are just going to do essentially exactly the same thing. So I'm just, let's see, from here where we transform the mesh, I'm going to copy this part down here. And here in front of the get actor all classes, I'm going to make a sequence. So we can detect different ones, right? We can detect the geometry, we can detect the substracts. So we're just getting get actor of all classes, class again. And this time we're going to put the substract parent inside here. So like that, and like that, and like that in here. Okay, we cannot directly plug this in, it seems. We have to get a new for each loop. This is because this is a different class. What we might be able to do is, if we delete things from here, let's just delete all of things. Let's start with a combine and delete all of that stuff out here. Compile it, and let's see if this works better now. Last time I did this, I had to rebuild parts of it because of how the connections work, how it updates. Let's just see if this works out. Go reroute node here, and let's compile to see if it's given us an error. No, okay, all good. Now you can see we have the full folder path geometry here. We need new variables for that. All right, so I'm going down here, and I'm going to copy those again, like we did in the beginning, just so we can detect which folders they are in. So, and I'm going to replace the variables here, starting with the full folder path here. Struct name geometry, and own folder Substract. All right. And obviously here we don't want to detect geometry, we want to detect Substract underscore, make sure you write it right. Substract. Okay, Substract. Then we're getting the dynamic mesh. We are allocating it into a new space. We're transforming it. And all we're doing in the end for now is mesh boolean. And we want the target mesh to be our own mesh. So the current one of the combine. And this one we're going to subtract and subtract. All right. Let's compile this. And let's see if things work. I'm going to, first of all, drag in a combine inside the combine. And then I'm going to drag in a geometry here. Inside the geometry, it's going to get built. Very nice. And I'm going to get a subtract inside the subtract. And if I now move this in, we can see it's nicely cutting things away. Now, one thing that is missing for the subtract is the material ID. So let's also do that before we are booleaning it. So subtract here, material ID here. And we're going to use that mesh and that mesh here. And as we did with the geometry, we need to give it a material ID. So we're going inside the subtract parent and we are going to give it a variable material ID. And we're going to change this into our integer. Hit compile, go back to our combine, and we should be able from here to get ourselves, first of all, a reroute and then material ID, material ID. And we can plug this in and we can say which material ID it should have. So we can now give the subtract a material ID when we need to expose it. So we can see it actually in the editor, exposed, instance editable. And here we see it. Let's give it a 2. And we go to our combine. I forgot one thing. We are not actually building the materials here. We need to set them somehow. So we do this in the combine. We need to also release our compute. So, yeah. And we essentially have to write IDs on our model. Thing is just that we do not assign new material slots essentially. So we're making ourselves a new thing here, and we can validate material slots. You can just hold over there, compute maximum material ID on the mesh, and ensure that the material slot matches. Okay, compile this, and now we actually get more materials. So this one is 0, this one is 2. So with that, we are going to create the material slots we need. And you can see we can also delete extra slots apparently. I guess if we go down 1 here, let's just go 1 here. See if we lose 1. Actually, yes, we do. This is nice. Let's give it a 2. 5. Okay. And just 1. All right. So we will get as many material slots as the highest number of our IDs essentially is. Meaning if we put this to 5, we might still have, or not 56, 5. We might still have some in between which are not in use, which is not a problem because we can, when we're saving out the mesh, delete them anyway. But let's just for tests give the subtract some material. Let's just give the subtract here. We gave it the slot 5, so 5, and there we go. It got the material. And we give the geometry green here. We put this to 0, so 0 right here, and there we go. We can control the materials with that.